Chapter 4 Harry Potter vs. Remus Lupin, PT 1. I was concerned about my Horcruxes. If a Weasley was capable of stealing one of them, then they weren't nearly as safe as I had presumed. My first instinct was to gather up my poor soul pieces and never again let them out of my sight. Unfortunately, after many hours of deliberation, I decided that I couldn't risk hiding 5 dark artifacts under my bed, at least not with Dumbledore's keen eyes always upon me. Yet, after destroying Diary, I was left with only 4 Horcruxes, 2 less than I'd originally intended. For my own peace of mind, I would have to create a new one. Now, I just needed to find someone I wanted to kill. That shouldn't be too hard. Used to happen all the time. I skimmed the prophet, whose title proclaimed the escape of Sirius Black. My right-hand man. You think I'd remember something like that? I shrugged. I'd certainly forgotten more important things over the past 12 years. Besides, the Blacks were a dark family, so of course he was one of mine. It was a pity to lose him. After all, not every minion could escape from Azkaban. That's the sort of talent that can conquer a nation. I almost regretted abandoning my previous activities, but not quite. Dementors, I ranted. What could possibly convince Dumbledore to bring Dementors into the school? Hermione said. It's just to keep us safe from Sirius Black, Harry. Right, of course it is. They're protecting us from an emaciated, wandless convict who might want to kill some of us by hiring 100 dark creatures that definitely want to eat all of our souls. However did I forget? Dementors are terrifying. I might have cut up and scattered my soul, but I assure you I'm quite attached to it. I really needed to make that Horcrux. Surely no one would miss a Weasley or two. The Grim, Trelawney cried, skeletal hands fluttering around her mouth. You're in grave danger, Mr. Potter, very grave danger. I'm always in grave danger, I said. It wasn't like I sought out these things precisely. It's more that getting what I want often involves dangerous situations, and I happen to be immortal. You could die, she insisted. One of the Gryffindor girls, probably Lavender, shrieked. I snorted. Not likely. I've heard you do this every year, Hermione snapped. Tell some poor student they're going to die and scare them. But they never do. Come to think of it, I mumbled. Why don't you ever predict the deaths that actually occur, like the Perks girl? Hermione sighed. Harry, Sally, and moved. Yes, that's what they told us, I said, patting her reassuringly on the arm. Of course, most of those deaths are first or second years, who naturally wouldn't have your class. I imagine you wouldn't even see them except in the Great Hall. Wait, is that why you never come to meals? Aye, Trelawney was taken aback at my insight. Yes, I'm afraid that's true. A prophecy once spoken can never be averted, you know, and it's such a terrible thing to see those poor, doomed children. Now back to your teacups, everyone. I can sense your third eyes fluttering shut. We don't have dark magic, Ron yelped. I suppressed an exasperated sigh. Ron, all pure-blood families have dark magic. If you don't know about yours, it's because your family doesn't trust you. Horror filled his Weasley eyes. Why wouldn't they trust me? You're the 6th son, Ron. That's easily 3 more sons than they need. They won't tell you a thing until you've proven yourself worthy. He leaned forward, desperate to learn more. How do I do that? I thought for a moment. Have you tried asking? That would show that you're smart enough to know about these things. Ron grinned, clapping me on the back. Thanks, mate. You're the best. A howler chased Ron out of the great hall, spitting smoke and screeching. How dare you ask us about dark magic? Just what exactly are you doing in that school, Ronald Bilious Weasley? Why, I should. I bit into a piece of bacon, contemplating the very public response. A brilliant ploy. The Weasley matriarch was cunning indeed. Can we go back inside now? I whined. No, Ron said. He had forced me to attend a Quidditch match because I owed him for the Howler incident. The intricacies of maintaining a friendship never ceased to baffle me. I'd usually not bother with such things. However, the boy's loyalty depended upon his delusion that he was my best mate, and it would take months to break in a new Weasley. I groaned. But it's pouring rain. So what? You're not even wet. Hermione asked. Why is that anyway? I'm Harry Potter, I said. That doesn't mean any. Oh, look, the game's starting. Hermione fell into a disgruntled but obedient silence while the players zipped about in the rain. Quidditch, such a ridiculous game. It's entirely reliant upon the skill of the seeker, unless one team is ridiculously outmatched, in which case the seeker is superfluous. Furthermore, the Quidditch game's points are far too tied into the House Cup, which irked me greatly during my first time as a student. There I was answering questions, acing tests, charming professors, and earning loads of points, only for one clumsy seeker to ruin our chances of winning. I do not lose. Therefore, I convinced the Ravenclaw and Slytherin seekers to sit on the field for a week, while their chasers racked up so many points that one of our houses would win, even if the teachers blatantly cheated in favor of the others. That was the first year I won the House Cup for Slytherin, and the reason that Hogwarts games are no longer allowed to last more than 3 days. Pleased at my victory over foolishness, I'd cheerfully gone back to ignoring the sport. "This is boring," I said. Ron's face wrinkled with the effort of thinking. "What do you mean? Didn't you see that dive by Spinnet?" Yes, I'm sure it was very nice. I didn't notice because it is pouring rain. It's also freezing out here." Hermione asked, "Didn't you cast a warming charm?" "Of course I cast a warming charm." "I did too," she said slowly. "So why is it so cold?" I peered through the thick rain and the mist of my icy breath until I finally spotted the cloak of a Dementor. I could feel misery creeping into my already frustrated mind, turning the world even dimmer than it already was. Dementors both cause and feed off of unhappiness. Trying to dredge up happiness in their fog is insanely difficult and bound to work for only a fleeting period. It's far easier to grow angry. How dare they make you sad? That way, they'll focus on your depressed companions while leaving you alone. If you haven't escaped by the time everyone else is eaten, you deserve death. Unfortunately, blinding fury is not conducive to good decision-making. "Wow, Harry, I can't believe you charged a Dementor," Ron said. At the same time, Hermione said, "I can't believe you would do something so stupid." "Dementors have no natural predators, so they have no idea how to react to aggression," I said. Admittedly, this hadn't occurred to me at the time, but it certainly explained the creature's terrified flight. "It's a good thing Professor Lupin cast a Patronus before you got hurt," Hermione continued. "I could have taken it." Only 13 years old, and Hermione Granger was already planning her first genocide. While I admired her precocious cruelty, I hadn't even dreamed of such things until I was at least 16. I just had to ask, "Hermione, why do you hate house elves so much?" She poked her head out from under the couch where she'd been hiding a malformed mitten. "I'm sorry." "I'm not judging," I hastily assured her, "just curious." "Harry, I don't hate house elves," she said. There was no particular reason for her to lie. It was nearly midnight, and the common room was empty of eavesdroppers. "I'm not sure why else you'd be doing that," I said, gesturing towards the hat she'd stuffed under a table leg. Hermione stood up proudly and proclaimed, "I'm trying to free them." I blinked, attempting to make sense of her logic. "You do realize that house elves die when you free them, right?" Impressive actress that she was, Hermione flipped from cheerful to threatening tears in an instant. What? "I mean, I sort of thought you knew," I said. "Free elves just lie down and die. They don't eat or sleep." "I'd seen it happen once, and let me tell you it was hilarious," she sniffled. "I, didn't know. I went to the library, but there weren't many books talking about them." I suppose one book said not to free elves, but it was also full of tea-torture techniques, and oh, it's all so awful. She frantically began picking up the knitwear she'd hidden around the room. I hummed thoughtfully. "Really, I'm not sure why you thought leaving clothes around would help at all. They do our laundry." Hermione paused. "I hadn't thought of that." She looked down at the clothing piled in her arms. "I don't suppose you want a hat or something." I chuckled and placed an arm around my minion's shoulder. "Hermione, not even the house elves want your hats. My classmates are so boring. Our latest defense teacher had acquired a boggart, a creature capable of showing one's greatest fear. But what did it show? The murder of their loved ones, the destruction of all they held dear. My own impressive self, either as Lord Voldemort or Harry Potter. No, of course not. That would be entertaining. Instead, I had to suffer through 10 straight minutes of acromantulas. Lupin frowned as Ron's boggart skidded past on roller skates. "Another spider. One killed our last defense professor," Hermione informed him. "It also petrified several students," I added. Lupin said, "Acromantulas can't do that." "It was enchanted by Salazar Slytherin," I said as the boggart morphed into a slightly taller, longer-fanged version of its previous form. "Acromantulas really aren't that frightening." It wouldn't have even succeeded in slaying Lockhart if I hadn't hit him with a tripping jinx at a crucial moment. Therefore, I decided to add a little interest to the proceedings by revealing my own boggart. Honestly, I wasn't certain what form the creature would take. Oh, sure, I had reasonable concerns, such as having my soul consumed by a Dementor. Still, none of them would send me into a panic. Even death seemed less daunting after I'd successfully conquered it. I stepped forward, shoving Lupin aside when he tried to block my path. The boggart leapt at me, its black legs turning blue and melding into robes. White fangs lengthened into a beard, and the creature's two remaining eyes twinkled. Dumbledore, I hissed, raising my wand. He chuckled, a sickening sound. Dear boy, did you really think I wouldn't notice? I froze. What? You're just the same as the Dark Lord was at your age. I shrank away, insisting, no, you're wrong. Ridiculous. Lupin said when he noticed my panic. A dozen tiny bows appeared in Dumbledore's beard. A few of my more simple-minded classmates started giggling, but I wasn't so naive. He had worn his beard in a similar manner during my first raid of Diagon Alley. I would have to be a fool not to see it, Dumbledore said, and I think we both know I'm not the fool I seem to be. Ah, ridiculous, I cried. His robes turned to a pink dress, the frilly hem resting above his wrinkled, hairy knees. But no, that's exactly the sort of thing he would wear, hoping to catch his enemies off guard. He smiled with false benevolence. Don't we, T? Ridiculous. The boggart fell, eyes dull and maggots crawling from his beard. I laughed hysterically. He's dead, I gasped. Oh, thank Merlin, he's finally dead. The boggart darted over to Hermione next, turning to a skeletal house, elf wearing nothing but a pair of poorly knitted mittens. I sat in front of Dumbledore's desk, eyeing the various knickknacks surrounding me and wondering how many were secretly weapons. Though the headmaster seemed as serene as ever, I'm fairly certain his phoenix was glaring at me. Lemon drop, Harry? Dumbledore asked. No, thank you, sir, I said, unwilling to consume its still unknown poison. Do you know why you're here? My hand twitched towards my wand as I stifled the urge to flee. No, I have no idea. Ah, his eyes began twinkling menacingly. I was just speaking with Professor Lupin. I have an idea now, I blurted out. He had finally put the pieces together. I rambled on. It's the boggart, isn't it? Well, let me tell you, I am not afraid of you. That would be incredibly ridiculous since you are so obviously a kind, completely genuine protector of the light. Practically a grandfather to me. Really? I had no idea you thought so well of me, Dumbledore asked, leaning forward. I nodded and tried to look very 13, possibly younger. Oh yes, I'm thinking that my greatest fear is really of terrifyingly powerful wizards who know where I sleep. You're more a metaphor for that. I would think Voldemort would be a more fitting example, Dumbledore said. Yes, well, I don't know what he looks like, I said. Also, I'm pretty sure he's dead. I only wish I were so certain, he sighed. What do you mean, sir? I squeaked. I was doomed. On the night Voldemort was vanquished, I'm afraid he didn't die. In fact, I believe he came to Hogwarts 2 years ago. 5 steps to the door. Dumbledore was old and his reflexes weren't the best. I could probably make it, so long as the Phoenix didn't go after me. If I ducked around a corner long enough to put on the invisibility cloak, I would probably be all right. He said, You seem nervous, Harry. I, don't like being called into a teacher's office, I said. If I started running now, I could probably catch him by surprise. Unless that was what he expected me to do. Curse him and his elaborate traps. I think I understand what your greatest fear is, he said gravely. You believe that you're like Voldemort, don't you? Ah, I wasn't sure what facial expression would be appropriate for the occasion, but I was fairly certain that the terror currently overwhelming my features was not a good choice. The old wizard chuckled. Allow me to set your mind at ease. You are nothing like Lord Voldemort. I gaped. Really? He was a cold, cruel child with no friends. In my defense, I was very devoted to my studies, and Dumbledore is exaggerating. Lots of people like me, except for him. Dumbledore continued. He would never have gone to protect the stone or set off into the Forbidden Forest to save his classmates from Slytherin's monster. Admittedly, I didn't do either of those things, but I certainly wasn't going to tell him that. Also, his twinkle intensified. I have it on good authority that he hated Quidditch. I forced a smile. Wow, we really are nothing alike. I love Quidditch. If only I wasn't Barlux on a broom, I'd have joined the team by now. I'm sure you would have, he chuckled. Are you certain you don't want a lemon drop? Very. I, should probably be getting back to my friends now. Goodbye, headmaster. I left as quickly as I could without making it obvious that I was fleeing. Either I had miraculously escaped Dumbledore's suspicion, for now, or he was just toying with me. hinting that he would leave me alone so long as I remained an amiable, Quidditch-obsessed Gryffindor. I wondered if suffering under whatever dark magic Dumbledore possessed would be less painful. "Harry, what are you still doing up here?" Hermione whispered, nose wrinkled at the heavy perfume and smoke that filled Trelawney's classroom. "Trying to open my third eye." The first time around, I dismissed divination as unnecessary. To my great distress, that seemingly unimportant gap in my knowledge led to my downfall, short-lived as it was. Hermione rolled her eyes. "Don't tell me you're buying into all this tripe. Trelawney is obviously a fraud." I smiled. Sometimes I forgot how little our group encyclopedia really knew. "Professor Trelawney," I corrected, mimicking her tone. Though I teased her about it, I was glad to see this rebellious streak. It proved that she was waking up and seeing authority figures for what they were, idiots. Upon closer observation, I had cast aside my early assumption that Hermione was this generation's Bellatrix. Her obsession with rules, goody-two-shoes personality, intelligence, and hidden cruelty were far more reminiscent of my younger self. Hermione pursed her lips. "Really, Harry, she hardly counts as a professor. She doesn't teach anything, at least not anything useful." "You don't really believe that you're going to die, do you?" "Technically, I already had." "Of course not, Hermione," I assured her, squinting into the mists of my crystal ball. Hermione huffed and stormed out. Her robes billowed behind her as she disappeared into the smoke of Trelawney's poorly ventilated room. She certainly had the theatrics of a Dark Lord. Perhaps I should use Longbottom for my Horcrux. He had yet to swear an oath of unending loyalty, and Merlin forbid if the prophecy was correct, and I'd picked the wrong child. It wouldn't be hard to cover up. I could pretend it was a potions accident or something. Everyone would believe that. Except, no, much as it pained me to admit it, Longbottom was as integral to Slytherin's House Cup victory as I was. Such a resource should not be wasted frivolously. Since I am substituting for Professor Lupin for the 7th time in as many months, I will preemptively inform you that our topic next month will once again be werewolves, Severus said dourly. "Can't we do something else?" Ron groaned. 10 points from Gryffindor for questioning a teacher. I raised my hand. "I don't suppose we'll learn how to kill them. I feel like I know a lot about werewolves, but am ill-equipped to destroy one." Severus smiled thinly. "Yes, I do believe that will be the topic of our next lesson. Good question, Potter. 20 points from Gryffindor." Ron flailed his arms around in confusion, threatening to knock over my inkwell. "But you said it was a good question." 10 more points for disrespect," Severus said, sweeping out of the room. I tried not to look too obviously pleased. "Snape's a git," Ron said. I shook my head, sighing. "Well, you can hardly blame him, what with his condition and all." "Huh. He's obviously a werewolf," I said. "Oh, Harry, that's ridiculous," Hermione huffed. I raised a hand to silence her objections. "No need to cover for him. This is clearly a cry for help." "You've gotta be kidding me," Seamus Finnegan said. "Snape's a werewolf." "Of course he is. That's why he's been teaching about them every time he substitutes. It's all he knows." "He does seem to know an awful lot about werewolves," Longbottom mumbled, looking a bit green. The class exploded into discussion, and I made sure to drag Hermione into the hallway before she finally exclaimed, "You don't seriously believe that Professor Snape is a werewolf?" "No, Hermione, that would be ridiculous," I said. "Then why would you say something like that? People are absolutely awful about werewolves. Do you know what that kind of rumor could do to his reputation?" "Yes, which is why I don't appreciate him trying to out Lupin." She looked startled. "You know about that?" "Snape's been teaching about werewolves for months, and Lupin's gone every full moon." "I'm not an idiot," I said. While I was growing concerned about my classmates' mental abilities, the truth is that I suspected Lupin long before his first-class absence. You see, several of my minions were werewolves back when I was Lord Voldemort. I know the signs well. "Oh," Hermione murmured. "And I'm honestly offended that Snape is so intent upon ruining his colleague's life. Werewolves are perfectly reasonable people, so long as they're taking the proper potion. This rumor will provide a plausible explanation for Snape's actions and help to hide Lupin's secret." She beamed. "That's very noble, but mostly I thought it would be funny," I finished. Chapter 5, Harry Potter vs. Remus Lupin, PT. 2. "We are breaking so many rules right now," Hermione fretted. Out after curfew, out of bounds, walking around in the forbidden forest. Ron rolled his eyes. Don't be such a stick in the mud, Hermione. This is a real problem, Ronald, she cried. Oh, and that isn't even getting into the morality of this. We're hunting unicorns, I said. What could possibly be immoral about that? Hunting, she said grimly as we trudged through the forest. Well, it's not like we're killing them. Would you feel better if I said we were looking for unicorns? She huffed. I don't know why we're doing this in the first place. I heaved a heavy sigh. We've been over this. Hagrid burned down half of the Forbidden Forest a couple of years ago with his evil dragon. That means we're twice as likely to find unicorns. But why? I abruptly stopped walking. Ron oafishly bumped into me, possibly because I was once again using my invisibility cloak as a regular cloak. I stared at my favorite minion. Are you telling me you don't want a unicorn? Dear Merlin, Hermione, what kind of little girl are you? Do you even have a soul? She seemed unsure of how to respond, descending into sullen silence. I grinned as we continued our walk through the forest. Now let's go over the plan. Ron, you'll be bait. I don't think I like being bait, Ron said, glancing at the shadows in search of man-eating spiders. It's only a unicorn. Don't be a Hufflepuff, I said. Attempting to lend some degree of comfort, I reached over to pat him on the shoulder. He shrieked. All right, my arm was still invisible because of the cloak. I'd take it off, but it was bound to wear down before graduation, so I hoped to get some use from it while I still could. Can't Hermione be bait? Ron whined. No, unicorns only come to the pure of heart. She doesn't have a soul, remember. Don't be ridiculous, Hermione snapped. Really, why is having a unicorn so important anyway? I sighed and reminded myself once again that my companions were still very young and naive. One day, Hermione, you're going to wake up and realize that you're nothing but an angry old man lashing out at everyone who reminds you of how miserable you are. And you'll think to yourself, if only I had seen just one beautiful thing. If only I could have found proof that the world wasn't entirely horrible and corrupt. If only I had seen a unicorn. Okay, we can look for unicorns, Hermione mumbled. I beamed, slinging a still invisible arm around her shoulder. I knew you would see things my way. Now all we have to do is stop. A voice shouted from behind us. Don't go any farther. I cursed as Professor Lupin jogged over to us. The werewolf had followed us into the forest. At this rate, we would never find a unicorn. I told you we shouldn't do this, Hermione hissed. Oh, we'll be fine. I'd have disappeared under my cloak and continued the search, but I didn't trust Hermione to cover for me. Besides, I couldn't leave without my unicorn bait. Lupin said, I've finally found you. Now where's Miss Weasley? Ron's right over there, I said, pointing at him with an invisible arm. Hey, I'm not a girl, Ron shouted at Lupin. Yeah, I agreed. Lupin chuckled. I do know that, Mr. Weasley. I was talking about your younger sister. I assume she's hiding somewhere among the trees. I snorted and said, Professor, we're trying to capture a unicorn. We can't afford to be slowed down by some second-year girl who probably still plays with dolls and puts flowers in her hair. Things were progressing slowly enough with 2 third-years. She's been missing for a few hours now, Lupin said thoughtfully, and she was last spotted leaving the castle. None of the portraits saw her come back in. I shrugged. That didn't seem too odd for her, considering the whole Chamber of Secrets incident. She's probably performing some sort of dark ritual. It is the night of the full moon, after all. Lupin suddenly became very pale. Oh, Merlin, it is. Professor, Hermione said slowly. You didn't forget to take your potion today, did you? Ron yelped. You don't think Snape's out here? He probably is, I said. Right now, he's prowling through the forest, mad with animalistic rage. Werewolves are well known for their thirst for virgin blood. Your sister is likely lost to us. Hermione said, First of all, werewolves don't drink blood. That's vampires. Second of all, that virgin thing is a myth. Third of all, the moon isn't even out as it's still cloudy. Finally, Hermione was interrupted when Lupin rasped, Run! He was hunched over, fur sprouting from the back of his hands. Loud cracking sounds echoed through the forest, and Hermione's eyes widened. Professor, are you okay? Forget about me. I didn't take wolfsbane. You're all in danger, he said, though I could hardly hear the words amid his growls. His face appeared to be twisting into a snout. Ron said, You mean Lupin was the werewolf the whole time? Obviously, I said. Really, Snape spent several classes talking about them. You think you'd know the signs by now. But you said, Ron, you really ought to know not to take me at my word. Don't you remember how I promised to feed Scabbers when you were in the hospital wing last year? In my defense, the rat did survive, and its recently declining health was almost certainly not my fault. There was a girlish shriek, probably Ron, then a loud growl. Ah, yes, the ravenous werewolf. I'd forgotten. I grabbed Hermione's hand and started running. What? I might be an incredibly powerful wizard, but I'm no Lockhart. The werewolf pursued us, snapping at our cloaks and leaving deep gashes in the forest floor. I cursed. I couldn't find a unicorn. I was in the middle of the woods, and a professor was trying to eat me. Come to think of it, this was a lot like the first time I went through third year. Through some small fortune, the moon provided enough light to navigate through the trees. Hermione still occasionally stumbled on a shadowed route, but my steadying hand kept her on her feet. I found myself wishing that the werewolf would trip over one as well and give us a head start to escape. I then realized that I was thinking like a Hufflepuff and cast a tripping jinx. As usual, my quick thinking had saved our lives. We emerged from the forest shortly afterward and hid in Hagrid's abandoned hut. I barricaded the door with one of his comically oversized chairs and a plank that was propped beside it for the purpose. Then I added several locking and strengthening spells because I'm not a squib. Hermione collapsed against the wall, still breathing heavily from our dash. I wasn't doing too well myself. It's unfortunate how academic mindedness may lead one to neglect their physical strength. Well, thankfully that's over, I said. Why, yeah, Hermione murmured. This actually went fairly well. We were only caught sneaking out because of the Weasley girl. Hermione's eyes widened as she contemplated the girl's grisly demise. Waiter, we managed to defeat a werewolf, which is pretty impressive for 3 third years. Harry, sure, we didn't find a unicorn, but that was clearly Ron's fault. I paused. Galloping gargoyles, we forgot Ron. Hermione, why didn't you inform me of this? I tried to. Enough of your excuses, I said. You've once again recklessly endangered our friend through your horrible apathy. I bowed my head. It was a pity. I'd liked Ron, or at least he'd liked me. Something like that. My disappointment over his loss nearly equaled my disappointment over his failure to attract a unicorn. We can still save him, Hermione said. She stood up, her eyes gleaming with Gryffindor determination. No, Hermione, it's too late to go back for him now. He's already dead, and he wouldn't want us to tarnish his sacrifice by getting eaten by werewolves. She bit her lip, seeming to argue with herself for a moment before pulling something from beneath her cloak. I couldn't see in the dim light of the derelict hut, so I cast Lumos. A small hourglass dangled at the end of a chain. I gaped in a very Weasley fashion. Hermione, why do you have a time turner? Are you a Department of Mysteries spy? That would explain everything. Hermione was always unsettlingly mature and had never blended in with real children. She understood magic in a primarily academic sense, as if she'd learned it already. She was an adept liar, as I'd learned early on in our friendship. Finally, it couldn't be a coincidence that she'd ended up in the same year and house as the famous Harry Potter, even though she was clearly a Ravenclaw. Hermione frowned. No, of course not. I got it from McGonagall so that I could take all the electives. Hold on, you're telling me that if you take 2 extra classes, the school will give you power over time. Why don't they advertise these things? I grumbled. I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, and I think it was sort of a special allowance for me, Hermione said. That makes it worse. Hermione rolled her eyes, but knew better than to argue when I was obviously correct. She walked over and gestured for me to take hold of the time turner. With a well-practiced hand, she turned the hourglass twice, and we fell into the past. I landed on my back. It seemed that I would have to get used to magical travel all over again. As I waited for my head to stop spinning, I stared up at the ceiling of Hagrid's dilapidated hut. There was a hole in it already, I noted, which was odd considering it had only been empty for a year. Perhaps the groundskeeper's home shared the castle's dramatic tendencies. The sky was tinted orange and pink with the setting sun, and warm sunlight fell across my face from a dingy window. Why is the sun setting? I asked. Hermione bit her lip as she glanced down and said carefully, We went back in time. You do remember, don't you? You didn't hit your. I am aware that we traveled through time. I am not an idiot, I said. Just how far back did you take us? 3 hours, Hermione said. I sat up abruptly. Why? We have to plan, of course. She sniffed haughtily, reaching out a hand to help me up. I attempted to stand on my own, fell, and repeated the process until I was shakily on my feet. What's to plan? We grab Ron and run away. Harry, we can't face down a werewolf without proper preparation, she chided as we made our way to the door. It was locked, so Hermione cast a Lohomora. We left the door slightly open as we walked towards the forest. We don't have to, though. It'll be too busy trying to eat us. I what? Past us, Hermione, keep up. I sighed. Was no one my intellectual equal? But it won't be chasing us for more than a few minutes, Hermione said. Yes, that's why we run. We've already been over this. But stop distracting from the issue. You took us 3 hours back in time, which means that I'm 3 hours older and 3 hours closer to death. You're killing me, Hermione, just as you killed Ron. I finished with a smirk. She smacked me on the arm, snapping, I did not kill Ron. No, that won't happen for 3 hours, I said. Also, his killer is technically Lupin. He's not going to die, Hermione said. We're saving him. Can I come? I whirled around in surprise as the Weasley girl stood behind us. I'm sorry, Hermione squeaked, stuffing her time turner under her robes. The Weasley's chin tilted defiantly. You traveled back in time to save Ron from Professor Lupin's werewolf form, and I want to help. How did you know that? I demanded. Are you using legilimency right now? Hermione, don't look at her eyes. The redhead frowned, brow wrinkling in a very Weasley confusion. Ah, no, I just heard you talking. You do realize that your invisibility cloak doesn't shield sound, right? No, it unfortunately does not, I sighed, glancing down at my beloved cloak, or at least the space where I was pretty sure it was, since it was invisible at the moment. So can I come then? She asked brightly. We are short a Weasley, I said. I don't suppose you know your family's dark magic. Her eyes shone fervently. No, but I think I'm getting close. Good, you're doing better than Ron then. That made sense considering she was their only daughter and the seventh child. 7 is a magical number. There's no point in having 7 children if you aren't going to empower the last of them. Hermione stood gaping at us. I'm in then, I hummed thoughtfully. How's your stunner? I don't know that spell, she admitted. Then you'll be a reasonable substitute for Ron, I assured her. Hermione had successfully recovered from her earlier shock. Her voice was flat. Your parents actually told you they have dark magic. The Weasley girl shrugged. Not exactly, though they leave some pretty obvious hints. I don't think I would have caught on if a friend of mine hadn't told me about it. Was that friend Harry? Hermione asked with a skeptical eyebrow buried beneath her enormous hair. It wasn't me, I said. It wasn't him, she agreed. Then who was it? The redhead blushed brightly, stuttering. It was an older boy. He graduated. You wouldn't know him. See, Hermione, even the upperclassmen agree with me, I said. She sighed, rolling her eyes. The Weasley girl asked, so what do we do now? I suppose we can look for unicorns again. Well, that was a dismal failure, I grumbled as we walked through the forest towards the spot where Lupin attacked us. I told you we needed Ron. Sorry, Harry, the youngest Weasley said. Consider yourself begrudgingly forgiven, I said magnanimously. It wasn't all bad, though, was it? She continued. I still can't believe that your first reaction to seeing a Grim is to hex it. Yes, I said. That was pretty great. Oh, I hope we're not too late. That meadow was awfully far out, and it wasn't even bathed in moonlight. So I'm not certain what the point even, Hermione gasped. That's us. Hide, we can't let them see us. She crouched among the shrubbery while the Weasley and I stood and watched through the trees. In the hospital wing last year. One of the figures finished arrogantly, probably Hermione. I raised my wand and incanted, Accio Weasley. The Weasley girl fell against me with a startled shriek, and Ron flew backward, occasionally hitting a tree. He skidded to a halt a foot in front of me. In the distance, Hermione and I fled from Lupin. Ron stared up at us stupidly. Harry, obviously, I said. Were you expecting a unicorn? He laughed weakly. Oh, good. For a second there, I'd thought you guys had just left me there. I said, Ron, we would never do that. You are our dearest friend, and frankly, I think worse of you for saying something so disloyal. Hermione flung her arms around him and began sniffling against his shoulder. I scowled. See, you've upset Hermione. He turned towards our substitute Weasley. Wait, how'd you get here? She's been with us for 3 hours. Pay attention. I have, the youngest Weasley agreed. Ron's face twisted in confusion. But enough of this. We have to get out of here before the werewolf comes back. I think we all felt a little better once we entered the castle, and our odds of being maimed fell to their usual, slightly less alarming level. Ron grinned. Glad that's over. Yes, I said, though we never did find that unicorn. I said I was sorry about that, the Weasley girl muttered with a tone worryingly close to rebellion. Ron slung an arm around Hermione's shoulders. See, we didn't even get in trouble. It was at that moment that Severus descended from the shadows beneath the staircase, eyes gleaming. He always was over-dramatic. My, what have we here? Has the lost little lion decided to grace us with her presence? Oh, and of course you're in the thick of this, Potter. He gestured towards me with a sweep of his black-robed arm. Hermione immediately came up with a cover story. You have to understand, Professor, we were just worried about Ginny. So you decided to go after her yourselves, rather than let the professors handle the situation. 20 points for typical Gryffindor foolishness. In retrospect, it was a bad idea, she said hurriedly, but we did find her before anyone else. And then Lupin found us, I said. Sir, I'm not sure if you were aware of this, but it turns out he was the werewolf all along. He tried to eat us. Severus was clearly pleased. He said, continue. He forgot to take his wolfsbane because he is an idiot. Fortunately, I cast a tripping jinx and threw him off balance. Severus spoke approvingly. Attacking his feet, it seems you were paying attention after all. For applying your class knowledge to a real-life situation, 30 points to Slytherin. Hey, you can't. I paused. Did you just say Slytherin? Severus quirked an eyebrow and drawled. I'm on to you, Potter. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I'm very disappointed in you, Harry. He had once again summoned me to his office, but this time it seemed I was actually in trouble. I kept my eyes downcast so that he couldn't steal my thoughts. Come to think of it, I really needed to learn occlumency at some point, and I still hadn't made that Horcrux. Seeing that I wasn't going to answer, Dumbledore continued. Why did you tell everyone about Professor Lupin's condition? Surely you realized how much trouble that would cause him. I didn't tell everyone, I muttered. I only told Snape, though I admittedly should have suspected he couldn't be trusted with sensitive information considering he couldn't even keep his own lycanthropy secret. Professor Snape is not a werewolf, he said with a grandfatherly smile. No, I'm quite certain he is, I insisted. He told me so himself. I asked if he'd been attacked by a werewolf, and he said yes. Dumbledore coughed, no doubt trying to hide his shock at my brilliant deductions. That aside, I have it on good authority that you announced Professor Lupin's secret to the Gryffindor common room. That's not my fault. They were asking where I'd been. What was I supposed to do? Lie. Lie like a dirty Slytherin. Dumbledore accepted the insult without comment, which I assure you he never would have done when I was still Tom Riddle. You still did not need to ruin a good man's reputation. I stared at him incredulously. Usually, I would have meekly agreed and hoped to escape Dumbledore's wrath for one more day. However, he was acting even more insane than he usually pretended to be. Headmaster, he turns into a ravenous monster that attacks students. I had done many terrible things in my 2 lives, but I'd never accidentally murdered children. Dumbledore shook his head wearily. You have to understand that he would normally never harm a student. So long as he takes his wolfsbane, but he didn't take it, I pointed out. How do you even forget something like that? It was a very stressful night. Miss Weasley had just gone missing, and with Sirius Black still on the loose, you can't just panic every time a student goes missing. I cried. We would never get anything done if we did that. We still haven't found those 2 Hufflepuffs. I personally suspected the Dementors. Be that as it may, Dumbledore said. It was not your secret to tell. You could have spoken to me or Professor McGonagall. Right, because the staff handles murderous professors so well, I grumbled. That's why the Ministry stopped Hagrid's reign of terror and I had to take down Quirrell. Admittedly, both of them were entirely innocent, but Dumbledore didn't know that. Perhaps I've been too lenient. Dumbledore suddenly looked very old. One of these days he was going to die, and I would finally be safe. So, can I go now? Asked. I think some of the other Gryffindors are having a pickup game of Quidditch on the grounds. He said, one last thing, try not to stray too far from your aunt's house this summer. Sirius Black is still on the loose after all. I nodded. Dumbledore waved me away with a strained smile. Enjoy your Quidditch. I burst into the Gryffindor common room and approached my best minions. Ron, I barked. I need you to organize a Quidditch game. Ron jumped up from the couch like a proper minion. He then ruined the effect by questioning me. But I thought you hated Quidditch. This is a matter of vital importance. What could possibly be important about Quidditch? Hermione asked. Dumbledore, I said, voice flat. Ron scratched his head thoughtfully. I guess I can get Dean, Seamus, and Neville. Ginny's always up for a game. The twins would usually be too, but they're pretty focused on catching some master prankster right now. Hermione raised an eyebrow and asked, Master prankster? And gestured towards the wall, where Fred and George were analyzing a tapestry with a variety of spells. Yeah, apparently somebody tossed them into the wall last night. Percy got hit too. I'm surprised no one did this earlier, I sniffed disdainfully. They're completely insufferable. Harry, Hermione said, you do realize that was you, right? What? Last night, when you waved your wand and said, Akio Weasley. She mimed the motion with her wand, and Ron fell into her with a startled squeak. Meanwhile, the twins stumbled and looked around the room with narrowed eyes. Hermione hastily lowered her arm, mumbling, I probably shouldn't gesture with my wand. Don't be a muggle, Hermione, I said. And Ron, assemble our Quidditch team. I've had enough of your procrastination. It was then that Lupin's fur exploded outwards, his skin bursting and bloody underneath. I had to shout to be heard above the excited chattering of my fellow students. The Great Hall was always cacophonous during the end-of-the-year feast, and Gryffindors have painfully short attention spans. I said, Lupin got Ron, but we valiantly saved his life. Ron frowned. Mate, you've got to stop saying it like that. People are going to think I'm a werewolf. Ron, our classmates aren't idiots. That rumor will go away after a couple of moons. Now, what was I saying? Lupin was maiming Ron, one of my classmates said helpfully. Yes, thank you. I hit it with a stinging hex as a distraction. This gave Hermione and me time to grab Ron and run. The werewolf followed, of course, but a well-aimed curse knocked it off its feet. Where was Ginny? Longbottom asked. I looked across the table where the Weasley girl was gazing dreamily at me. Wait, is that your name? Yes, she said. I snorted. That's a house elf name. It's short for Ginevra, she reassured me. Oh, that makes more sense, I said. Yes, well, it turns out that Ginevra had fallen asleep by the groundskeeper's haunted hut, and we found her on the way out. Without our help, she surely would have died. Dumbledore's voice echoed through the hall. It's once again time to award the House Cup. This year's totals are Gryffindor, 200 points, Hufflepuff, 330 points, Ravenclaw, 413 points, and Slytherin, 500 points. Congratulations, Slytherin. Dumbledore gestured so that the banners changed to Slytherin green and silver. I clapped along with the rest of the Slytherins, earning unhappy looks from my Gryffindor housemates. The only thing that saved me from a tirade was my heavy frown. This victory was a bitter one. This is terrible, I declared. We lost to Hufflepuff. What is wrong with you people? It was not the first time in my life that 200 people simultaneously glared at me, but it was the first occasion I can recall that was not preceded by murder. I stared out of the Hogwarts Express's window. While I had absolutely no intention of joining Ron and Ginevra's game of exploding snap, the loud banging made it impossible to read any of the tomes I'd stolen from the library. That didn't keep Hermione from her latest book, of course. Nothing ever does. Therefore, we were all surprised when, with a frustrated huff, she shut it and exclaimed, I just don't understand. Wait, there's something the great Hermione Granger doesn't understand, Ron said, clutching his chest in mock horror. Ginevra giggled. Impossible. I believe that's a sign of the apocalypse, I said gravely. Hermione shot us an annoyed look. Stop being ridiculous. I was just thinking about the with a nervous glance at Ron, she said. You know what that helped me get to class on time? It's called a time turner, Hermione, I said. Hermione stood up angrily, once again trying to use her height advantage against me. I know what it's called. I just wasn't supposed to tell anyone else, and you promised to be discreet. Hermione, I never promised that. I was quite certain of it. I avoid promises on principle, notably the principle of not being held accountable for things. I still wasn't supposed to tell anyone, Hermione mumbled. I dismissed the Weasley kneeling on the train car floor with a flick of my wand. It's not like he has any idea what we're talking about. What's a time spinner? Ron asked. See, completely clueless, I assured her. You were saying. Hermione sat back down, though with more of a thud than was strictly necessary. It's just this whole business with Lupin. We had to use the turner to save Ron from Lupin. But Lupin only forgot his potion because he was looking for Ginny. But Ginny was only missing because we took her with us to save Ron. So, how did it all start? I chuckled. Oh, Hermione, this is time travel. These things never start. They just happen. That doesn't make any sense, she said flatly. Sure it does. You just haven't spent enough time in the magical world yet, I reassured her. Wait, you guys time traveled, Ron yelped. Was that what happened? It was really no surprise that Ginevra was making better progress in acquiring her family's dark magic. Ron simply had no cunning. Yes, Hermione time travels to attend all her classes. Not anymore, Hermione quickly said. I've given up divination and muggle studies, they were useless anyway, and returned the time turner to Professor McGonagall. My jaw dropped in a very Weasley fashion. You returned the time turner. But Hermione, we had the power to bend time to our will. We could have done so many things. That's why I returned it, Hermione said primly. Traitorous, selfish, and unrepentantly evil, yes, she was exactly like me at that age. Chapter 6, Harry Potter vs. Alistair Moody, PT. 1. I paced my room at the Dursleys, wand spinning between my fingers. Dumbledore had warned me to stay inside for fear of Sirius Black, and I had reluctantly abided by his request. But the Muggle world was exhausting, and worse yet, incredibly boring. The Weasleys' old owl thudded against my window, scratching the glass weakly. I scrambled toward it in a horribly undignified manner and swung open the window, causing the owl to fall into my room. He was probably dead. I shrugged and grabbed the message from his twitching claws. Hi, Harry, has Hermione been on you about doing homework? She's completely mental. We've got a whole month left. Did you hear that the Cannons won their last game? It's the third time this season. The twins say it's a fluke, but I think they've really got a chance at the cup. I skimmed the rest of the letter. Apparently, Ron's rat was eaten by a grim or something. See, this is why I miss the wizarding world. When I leave, even Ron has adventures without me. I scowled, returning to the letter. Mum's been asking when you're going to visit. If you want, you could probably come for the rest of the summer. I didn't read the end of the letter. I was too busy packing. Harry, that was my only warning as I stepped from Mr. Weasley's car and was viciously attacked. I stood still and waited for Hermione to stop hugging me. Hello, Hermione, I said. Ron. Ginevra also peeked at us from the doorway. Since she was attempting to be discreet, I pretended not to see her. Hey, mate, Ron said. His mother bustled over, beaming. I think she wanted to hug me as well, but I'd already got my wand out. She kept her hands clasped atop her chest. Smart of her, which made sense since she was only a Weasley by marriage. Harry, oh, it's so nice to finally meet you. I've been telling Ron to have you over for years. I didn't want to impose, I said. She smiled sweetly. No imposition at all. A loud ding echoed across the yard. With a harried look, the Weasley matriarch said, Now lunch will be ready in a few minutes, so don't stay out here too long. As she left, Ron turned to me. You didn't want to impose? Well, no, it seemed rude. Mate, that doesn't sound like you at all. When have you ever cared about being rude? I shrugged, tucking my wand back in my pocket since the danger of Weasley affection had passed. I was under the impression you lived in a shoebox. His Weasley mouth dropped open and stayed that way for some time. What? That's what Malfoy said, I said peevishly. He was just being an insulting git like he always is, Hermione said. I frowned and observed Ron with unshielded confusion. But if he was lying, why did you get so upset? Ron went on sputtering for a while, waving his hands around as if to illustrate some incomprehensible point. I turned my attention to a thoughtful Hermione, which could only lead to trouble. She stared at the place where Mr. Weasley's car was parked. Why didn't you mention that your family were muggles? Oh, I prefer not to talk about them. They're really quite insufferable, I said. What do you mean? Ron asked, finally recovered. They just are, I shrugged. You would understand if you met them. Hermione said, Harry, if you were raised by muggles, then where do all of your biases come from? I have legitimately no idea what you're talking about. You have no respect for Hufflepuffs, and sometimes you just completely disregard muggles like they aren't even people. Hermione cocked her head, giving me a suspicious look. Your family is all right with you coming here, right? You didn't just decide they were unimportant and go off without telling anyone. I tried to cut in on a completely unwarranted paranoia. Hermione, she rambled on, because that really seems like something you would do. I huffed, insulted. I told them. And I'll have you know they were very happy to see me go. There was hugging and everything. She giggled. Oh, I wasn't involved, I said, hoping she wouldn't get any ideas. They also had a party. That sounds nice, Hermione said. I wouldn't know. It was after I left. Hermione seemed quite stunned and failed to respond. Since the conversation was clearly over at that point, I wandered inside in search of lunch. Now she insists I've been emotionally neglected, whatever that means. Ron nodded. Yeah, Hermione can be kind of weird about stuff like that. It's like the house elves all over again, I grumbled, except I'm the house elf, and she's trying to kill me with her deformed mittens. What does that? It's a metaphor. Ron, don't strain yourself trying to make sense of it, I said. I paced the floor of Ron's room, bursting with agitated energy. Usually when I felt like this, I would relieve my tension by destroying something. But magic was not permitted over the summers, and I refused to break things with my hands like a muggle. She'd probably forget about it if we got out of the house for a bit, Ron said. I stopped pacing. That seemed reasonable for a Weasley suggestion. As much as Hermione struggles to care about things that are traditionally immoral, a quick distraction usually causes her to lose interest. Ron continued, I bet even a couple of days would do it. I'm listening. I woke up early the morning after the World Cup, no surprise, since I'd spent most of the previous day sleeping. Ron had been rather upset at Hermione's and my disinterest in the game, insisting upon waking me up every 10 minutes and snatching Hermione's book from her hands. But he forgot our betrayal easily enough after the cup's climactic finish. At least, I presume it was climactic. I slept through it. I left my invisibility cloak and other blankets crumpled on the couch as I wandered towards the tent's kitchen. The fridge was well stocked, but I'd never cared for cooking. Darby, I snapped. The house elf arrived a few minutes later, looking nervous. Yes, great Master Harry Potter, sir. You're late, I said. Darby is sorry, so very sorry, he cried, slamming his limbs violently against the floor in what might charitably be referred to as a bow. Master Lucy came home very late, and he wanted me to fetch him pain potions. I did not want to be making him angry. Don't let him order you around so much, I ordered. Darby nodded, ears flapping and eyes shining rebelliously. This is why I don't keep house elves. The risk of betrayal is far too great. I continued, now bring me whatever Lucius is having for breakfast. Ginevra stumbled upon me half-hour later as I was polishing off some sort of giant egg set on a silver plate. Harry, she gasped, then shouted, he's right here. A stampede of Weasleys and a lone Hermione stumbled, bleary-eyed from their rooms. Hermione cried indignantly, where have you been? We were worried sick. I frowned, confused and quite displeased with the feeling. It's not like I don't usually sleep under the cloak. Hermione's fists clenched, and she hissed, you weren't in your bed. If I was in my bed, then that would destroy the whole point of sleeping invisible. I said. She gave a little screech of frustration, while Mr. Weasley said, I'm glad you're safe. I suppose you couldn't find us during the attack. Attack? One of the Weasley twins spoke, voice filled with the appropriate amount of awe. You slept through a Death Eater attack. After a further 10 minutes of failing to communicate, entirely the Weasleys' fault, I found out that a group of Death Eaters had come to wreak havoc, torment muggles, and generally have a good time. I had slept through it, a skill I'd acquired during my reign of terror. It was nice, I reflected, to see the Death Eaters taking the initiative. Perhaps they were paying homage to their fallen leader. I don't know why else they would attack a Quidditch game. At the head table, Dumbledore began his start-of-term speech. First, he happily informed us that the Dementors had been removed due to our foreign visitors. Apparently Beauxbatons takes a dim view on the consumption of their students' souls. Then he turned to the topic of horrible deaths, as he does every year. I wasn't paying much attention, consumed by my thoughts. The Triwizard Tournament had finally returned to Hogwarts. It hadn't been around when I was a student, or I would have another trophy to add to my collection. In fact, it hadn't been around for 2 centuries. Trust Dumbledore to revive a dangerous, Gryffindorishly reckless competition. Still, it fit well in the narrative of Harry Potter, vanquisher of the Dark Lord and future Hogwarts professor. As we stood to leave the Great Hall, Ginevra at our heels, Ron snatched some sweets from the table. Hermione sighed dramatically. Do you really need more sugar, Ronald? His words were mangled by a mouthful of food. I'm a GWing boy. She wrinkled her nose. You don't need sugar to grow. You want a bacteria, and that's disgusting. You're I'm going to win the Triwizard Tournament, I declared. What? Hermione shrieked, once again paying attention to me, as is only appropriate. Harry, that's even worse than your usual ideas. People die doing things like this. I shrugged. It can't be any more dangerous than going to school usually is. Ron frowned, jogging to keep pace with us as I sped up with enthusiasm and Hermione with righteous anger. I dunno, Dumbledore thinks it's dangerous, and he hires werewolves as professors. I said, I still think I'll be fine. Well, you can't enter anyway, Hermione sniffed. It's 7th years and older, no exceptions. That doesn't seem very fair. Even if we start doing it regularly again, it isn't due for 5 more years. I'll have graduated by then. Then I'll never get the chance to compete. It's for your own safety, she said. The goblet wouldn't choose me if I couldn't compete. At least I didn't think it would. How did that work? But it can hardly judge if I don't put in my name. They'll put up protections to stop you, Hermione said with a desperate sort of hope. I'll get around them, I assured her. I'll help, Harry, Ginevra said. Ah, yes, I'd forgotten about you. We had reached the common room by then, going inside with a muttered flobberworm. The familiar red room, filled with chattering students, greeted us. I took the only available chair, earning an insolent glare from Hermione and a hey. From Ron, Ginevra stood without complaint, which nearly made me regret my decision. I took a deep breath. Look, Ginevra, we have to talk about this. I waved my hand vaguely. Following us thing. I didn't say anything before because we were at your house, and you should be able to stalk whomever you like at your house. But this is my house. It's a school, Harry. It's nobody's house, Hermione said as she dug out her Transfiguration book, intent upon reading it for the 3rd time before term. I ignored her, of course. Now, I appreciate your stepping in last year. You made a perfectly suitable substitute for Ron. But Ron's back, and he has seniority. Ginevra pouted, asking, why can't we both be your friends? I shook my head. We're already perilously close to a Weasley majority. I can't have the two of you stalemating. It's not like we're the same person, Ginevra said. I'm different from my brothers. See, now you sound exactly like Ron, I said. This just isn't going to work. Right, Hermione? Hermione didn't even look up from her textbook. I don't have a problem with Ginny. Right, Ron. Yeah, he said, elaborating at his sister's betrayed look. Sorry, Ginny, but you're my little sister and these are my friends. You should go spend time with your own friends. Ron paused for a moment. Ah, you do have friends, right? Ginevra frowned but didn't answer. Several seconds passed. Ginny, Ron asked nervously. I'm thinking, she snapped. Hermione finished reading another 12 pages before Ginevra spoke again. Yes. Good, I said. Then go and spend time in their company, earn their trust, fashion their loyalty, and when the time is right, you're starting to sound like a Slytherin mate, Ron said. Right, yes. What I meant to say was, have fun. Also leave. Professor Moody's magical eye had locked upon me the moment I entered the classroom, and it hadn't moved yet. He was suspicious of me, I could tell, and I forced my face to remain impassive as he explained the topic of today's lesson, the unforgivable curses. Still, I couldn't entirely quell my enthusiasm. They were my favorite curses, after all. So do any of you know which curses are most heavily punished by wizarding law? Moody asked, narrowing his eyes at the class as if one of us was going to burst into tears and confess to a heinous crime. My hand shot up, followed tentatively by Hermione's. Moody barked, Go on, Granger. The imperious curse, Hermione said. It forces the victim to follow the caster's orders. Good, he said. Moody pulled out 3 cages, each holding a spider. He turned his wand upon one of them and forced it to dance. A few nervous giggles greeted its performance, though none of my classmates took their eyes from the arachnid. Think it's funny, do you? Moody asked. You'd like it, would you, if I did it to you? No, sir, Longbottom squeaked, shaking his head so quickly that it seemed ready to fly from his shoulders. Good, that's next lesson, Moody laughed. Anyone else know one? Another illegal curse. My hand returned to the air, but at least one of Moody's eyes looked to the back of the room. You in the back. Now he was just toying with me. I should have expected as much from an old friend of Dumbledore. Longbottom said tentatively, the Cruciatus curse. Your name's Longbottom, Moody asked gruffly. Longbottom attempted to hide under his desk. This might have been more effective if Moody couldn't see through it. He enlarged the second spider, sparking terrified gasps from several students. A few slightly less terrified gasps came when he tortured it using the Cruciatus. And the last one. Unable to hold back any longer, I shouted, Avada Kedavra, the killing curse. It lets you kill things. Yes, I suppose you would know about that, Moody said, giving me an unsettling smile. He was on to me. He was on to me, and Dumbledore had already given him permission to cast unforgivables on students. Moody continued, "You are the only survivor of that curse." I laughed weakly. "Yes, of course. I'm not sure why else I would know it. Not like those bloody snakes," Ron grumbled. "I bet they've been casting them since they were in diapers." Moody smirked, gave a nod to Ron, and cast Avada Kedavra on the final spider. As my classmates breathed a collective sigh of relief at the arachnid's death, Moody's eye almost popped out of his head to watch me closer. I hoped my curse would strike early this year. I tilted my head, examining the age lines surrounding the goblet of fire. My 68th birthday was coming up, so it should let me through. Carefully, I nudged my foot against the line, feeling an ominous force pushing it back. Clearly, it responded to physical and not mental age. Of course, the Weasleys had artificially aged themselves and been thrown back regardless. Perhaps it required both, or possibly Dumbledore had enchanted it to only allow 7th years in. Yes, I decided, that seemed reasonable. It was probably for the best that I couldn't walk right through. That would raise all sorts of suspicions. No, I would have to take a more subtle approach. "Wingardium Leviosa," I said. The parchment on which I'd scribbled my name smoothly levitated forward, yet started shivering as it crossed the age line. Not far from the goblet, it stopped altogether, crumpled into a ball, and ricocheted back. The ball bounced off my forehead. Lip curled, I tossed the piece of parchment in the air and snarled, "Venties." It tumbled towards the goblet atop a spiral of wind, which knocked over several unsuspecting passers-by. It then returned at equal speed, again hitting my forehead. I was crouched on the stone floor, putting the last touches on my latest attempt to enter the tournament, when Ron and Hermione interrupted me an hour later. "About time. We've been looking for you all over. Hermione thought you were in the library." Ron made a face that was, for once, intentionally stupid. "Harry spends plenty of time in the library," Hermione said. "It's not my fault you like to pretend he's some sort of Quidditch fanatic." "He's coming around," Ron said with an offended look. "He practically begged me to organize a game last year, and he went to the cup with us." "2 instances is hardly evidence of a trend, Ronald," Hermione said. "Sure it isn't, Myone," Ron faked a cough. "Jealous." "I'm not jealous," Hermione mumbled, "and you know I hate that nickname." Grinning, Ron turned his attention to me. "What are you doing on the floor?" "Beating the age line," I said. I added another slash of ink onto the stone. It was a little wobbly and looked more like a dragon than a unicorn, so I vanished it. Hermione leaned over to peek at my work. She gasped. "Those are Newt-level runes. You don't even take ancient runes." "You aren't the only one who reads, Hermione," I said. She glanced triumphantly at Ron. "I told you." "So what's it do?" Ron asked. Hermione cleared her throat. "Well, I've only read about it in passing, mind you. It's a very complicated work, though not all that uncommon among curse breakers who need to move something that they can't touch, or in cases where other means of magical transportation might damage an object. It makes extensive use of the rune." "Yeah, but what does it do?" Hermione sniffed haughtily. "I was getting to that. It's used for teleporting things." "Dunno why you can't just say that," Ron muttered. "Always have to go off on some. At last," I cried, rising from the ground. "I've completed it. Oh, sure, Dumbledore protected against physical intrusion and simple spells, but he could never have prepared for something so intricate, so far above anything he would expect of a mere child. But I am more than that. I am Harry Potter, and I will not be thwarted by the likes of him." I smirked, dropping the ball of parchment atop the rune and laughing as it popped away. My eyes darted to the goblet. The parchment appeared directly above it, only millimeters from the top. But it didn't fall. It flew backwards and onto my forehead. As it fell to the ground, my eye twitched. I hadn't experienced such intense fury since the Dementor incident. I snatched up the crumpled parchment and blindly flung it at the goblet. It traveled uninterrupted as it passed the age line, bounced against the goblet's interior, and fell inside. Ron gaped. "You can just throw it in." "Of course," I said. They would never think to protect against the most base, mundane Muggle methods. After all, who would stoop so low? I smirked, congratulating myself on my astounding success. "Ron, bring me more paper. In fact, bring me all the paper you can find. Ink, too." Ron scurried off to do my bidding. Hermione, always questioning my decisions, asked, "Why do you need paper?" "I have to put my name in more times, obviously," I said. She pursed her lips. "No, you only need to put your name in once." Yes, that is what they would have you believe, I said, but I've contemplated this thoroughly. No one knows how the goblet works or why it chooses the student it does. Oh, sure, sometimes it picks a great fighter with unmatched cunning, but others it picks someone whose name was put in as a joke or a Hufflepuff. In retrospect, I was being redundant. So, Hermione asked, it's a lottery. Hermione rolled her eyes. That's ridiculous. No, believing that a big cup can choose the greatest champion based on a name on a slip of paper is ridiculous. What's it do? Analyze the handwriting. It's very advanced magic, Hermione said. Or it picks a name at random. What do you think is more likely? Ron raced towards me, a stack of parchment in hand. Got M. I nodded. Good, now get more. He took off again. I tore a strip of parchment off a sheet, scribbled my name, and shoved it into Hermione's hands. Make use of your terrible muggle origins and start throwing. And from Beauxbatons, Fleur de Lacquer, Dumbledore said. A haughty witch in powder blue flounced towards the back room. Hermione shot me a triumphant look. See, both of the champions were their school's favourites to win, and they're each very talented. It's not a lottery. I laughed, admiring her pig-headed attachment to an obviously incorrect theory. That's probably because they were the only ones who entered. Are you sure? Hermione asked. I spent 8 hours camped out next to the goblet yesterday, I'm pretty sure. Finally, Dumbledore said, for Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. A third slip of parchment shot into his hands atop a jet of green flame. Harry Potter. Told you, I said, standing to take a bow. A wave of disgruntled whispers echoed across the great hall. I don't know why any of them were surprised. Honestly, who were they expecting? A Hufflepuff? A Durmstrang student gasped. They can't actually let him compete. He's a fourth year, a seventh-year Hufflepuff side. It's always the bloody Gryffindors. He must have cheated, Draco Malfoy cried. Yeah, he cheated, one of the Weasley twins shouted. What did you think he was doing in the Great Hall yesterday, making paper airplanes or something? I smirked. I am the best at cheating, or I wouldn't have been chosen by the goblet. That doesn't make any sense, a Beauxbaton student said. I ignored them, sauntering towards the door where the previous champions had exited. Suddenly, the goblet flared again, and Dumbledore cleared his throat. It appears to be Harry Potter again in different handwriting. Merlin's tit, Harry broke the cup, Ron yelled. I said, I hope it doesn't do that with all the entries. Dumbledore appeared troubled. My boy, just how many times did you put your name in? Oh, 300 or so. A lot bounced off the rim, so it was difficult to keep track, I admitted. How the hell did you manage that? Someone shouted from the Slytherin table. It was a lot easier once I got the house elf production line going, I said. I never thought I would be so grateful for Hermione's literacy program. I didn't start that so they'd be better slaves, Hermione snapped. And yet that was still the result, I said. The harder she struggled against her naturally evil tendencies, the greater the eventual damage became. It was awe-inspiring, really. I left Hermione to her anger and followed the other champions. 20 minutes later, we were still waiting in the same room. Delacour actively ignored me, while Crumb's abortive attempts at conversation faltered before the shouting going on a few feet away. I watched in amusement as the judges squabbled over my entry. With her champion's fervent support, the Beauxbatons' headmistress insisted that competing against a 14-year-old wasn't very sporting. I personally had no problem beating children a third my age. The event organizer, Crouch, was similarly worried that Britain would be at a disadvantage. In contrast, Igor Karkaroff feared the overwhelming power implied by the night I vanquished myself. It was hard to say if that was a sign of his intelligence, cowardice, or paranoia. Or perhaps he'd simply seen that Dumbledore was twinkling again. Now, there's nothing to be done but let him compete, Dumbledore said. The goblet of fire is magically binding, and the boy was chosen by it. Twice, I added helpfully. We wouldn't want him to lose his magic, or even his life, because we were trying to protect him, he continued, smiling serenely. They couldn't argue with Dumbledore. No one ever can for long, so the judges begrudgingly agreed to let me compete and stormed off to sulk elsewhere. Their champions soon followed. Lemon drop? Dumbledore asked. I shook my head, unwilling to risk whatever concoction he devised to punish me for this latest scheme. No one ever wants my lemon drops, he sighed dramatically. Dumbledore popped a lemon drop in his mouth, winked at me, and left as well. Severus sneered at me from the corner of the room, sweeping forward only when everyone else had left. You really are exactly like your father, an arrogant, conceited, reckless fool with no regard for your own or others' safety. But even he would not have been so moronic as to enter a dangerous magical competition, repeatedly. I gave him a lazy smile. Bantering with Severus was such fun. Well, what can I say? I'm a typical Gryffindor, not a slimy Slytherin like you. Severus's eyes flashed with fury, and he leaned in so close that spittle flew at my face. Do you think this is a game, Potter? Technically, it's a tournament, I said. Severus drew back, almost physically reining in his emotions. He was silent for several moments, his lip curled in disgust at what he was about to do. I think it's about time you were actually punished. 20 points from Slytherin. My eyes widened. You can't do that. I'm not even in that house. Severus smiled cruelly, drawling, 5 more for your cheek, as he walked away. I don't understand, Hermione asked as we made our way towards the common room. Why doesn't he just give you detention? I chuckled. Oh, he tried that back in first year. So long as he's there, I rather enjoy them, and if they're unsupervised, I try to brew Felix Felicis and leave him to clean up the resulting poisons. The detentions are inevitably more of a punishment for him than me. We passed through the portrait entrance. Inside, a party was in full swing. They'd been planning this ever since the tournament was first announced, because the Hogwarts champion was obviously going to be a Gryffindor. A cheer erupted when the partiers spotted us, and someone shoved a butter beer in my hand. I grinned, announcing, my plan has finally come to fruition. Snape has decided to take points from Slytherin every time I annoy him. We're going to sweep the cup for the next 4 years. A second cheer went up, and a few people slapped me on the back. They soon turned their attention towards a keg of Weasley-smuggled fire whiskey. As we jostled our way through the crowd, Hermione said, Harry, you weren't actually planning. Nope. So you've just suddenly stopped rooting for Slytherin. I came to a very important realization today, I said. It doesn't matter what color the Great Hall is during the leaving feast or who gets bragging rights for the next year. What matters is that I am the one who decides. There is something seriously wrong with you, Hermione murmured. Thank you, I said. Speaking of something seriously wrong, there's Ron. Ron sat in a bright red armchair, an island of misery among the jovial crowd. He stared morosely at the contents of a textbook. Something was obviously amiss. Ron doesn't read. Ron, Hermione said softly. Are you all right? Ron shrugged, muttering, Yeah, I was just hoping it would be me. I plucked the book from his lap before he became confused and tried to eat it or something. You had your 12 chances. Ron, it's no one's fault that the goblet chose me in its lottery, except possibly Dumbledore. You can't blame Dumbledore for all your problems, Harry, Hermione sighed. I shook my head. This is different. I'm blaming him for Ron's problems.